what I'm saying is that you're dismissing Yasuke potentially being a good thing that can make the game better, or be a neutral and not make the game worse, before playing it. Because he's black, which is racism.
Because he is black, in a specific period of time,
He
in
existed.
a specific country,
He existed.
where dude, shit existed. Why didn't they make shit playable?
Is that the only reason you
because-
give me that he's not interesting is because he is black?
Yes, because he is in the wrong period of time in the wrong country.
He was there in reality. What do you mean?
It doesn't matter.
Yes, it
doesn't
does.
matter if
What?
No, why does it matter?
Because
why
it's
does
real.
it matter?
It's reality. That matters. I'm sorry. What?
I'm telling you, you're sitting in the boardroom making a game. So we're going back right to the beginning of our talk here.
Awesome. Let's go.
And you're saying, let's make a video game set in Japan, right?
Mm-hmm.
No ordinary person is thinking, oh shit, Japan, I hear black people. No
okay.
ordinary person is doing that.
Let me give you a different
Except
chain of
if it's
thought.
a person for whom race is
The chain
of
of thought.
absolute importance.
The chain of thought could be, hey, what if we included like a historical character here? That could be interesting. Oh, let's see. Who are the major historical? We want a playable historical samurai. Who are interesting playable historical samurai? Oh, there's this guy. There's this guy. There's this guy named Yasuke. We don't know if he's 100% a samurai, but he served Lord Nobunaga, the most influential figure in this era of the game we're talking about. And he was an interesting figure. People of Japan thought he was interesting, and we don't know anything about him. And they're like, oh, okay, so we don't know any. We could do them as like a blank slate type character and provide a different perspective and connect it to the Templars. That would actually really fit our narrative goals without him being black ever coming up. It doesn't matter. Like, you are assuming, and this is the problem that I'm having with you in general, is you're starting with this framework and you're making everything fit that framework. So your framework is that he had to be chosen because it was woke. He had to be chosen because of DEI. It cannot possibly be that he's an interesting character. And I reject that outright. That's simply wrong. Because Yasuke is an interesting character. He's fascinated Japanese people for years. They wrote stories about him. He's been in games. Like, him being here is not DEI. Him being here is because he's an interesting character.
That would be your opinion, right? And it would be shared by, I guess, 3 million other people.
So, okay.
The majority of gamers clearly doesn't share your opinion. So from a decision-making perspective, where we want to get as many people to play the game as possible.
You don't have to think he's interesting. You can think he's the most boring character ever. I don't know.
It happens to be that me and most other gamers don't agree with it, though.
No, you're mad because he's black. Not you specifically. You're mad because of DEI. But like, people are mad because he's black, not because he's not interesting. Most people that got mad the moment they saw the Yasuke trailer didn't know anything about fucking Yasuke. They didn't have even the chance to learn, am I interested in this character? Because they were outraged immediately. Because they were like, oh, he's black, I'm mad. Like,
yeah,
again,
can you understand why, though? Okay, so can I give you the most good faith steelman argument?
Sure, go for it.
Without trying to shoehorn DI or politics into it.
Okay.
Oh boy, Ubisoft just announced Assassin's Creed Shadows. This is going to be in Japan. I can't wait. Wait, where's the Japan? Why is this samurai? I was looking forward to Ghost of Yotei, but in Assassin's Creed. What is this? That no one asked for this. Why is this the character that is presented here? That is the most good faith steelman. It wasn't that he is black. It's that he doesn't belong in that fantasy because people had a preconceived notion of what they want to see. That's the whole point of the market.
Man. So okay.
Well, if Ubisoft announced Assassin's Creed Kenya, right? Everyone would go into that expecting to see some Kenyan prince, or Assassin's Creed Nigeria, some prince from a Nigerian tribe. And there's, by the way, something that I find very, very annoying about the gaming industry is that they continuously try to shoehorn black characters into IPs that don't necessarily make sense for them.
Okay, well,
when there is a wealth of stories in Africa. A wealth of stories in Africa that you can tell around insanely cool characters, right? Because every black tribe, and there are hundreds of them, have their own stories that you could take from. So when people see this game, right, they have expectations. So the second that you bring something
you-
that is against the expectations that they wanted to see, there is disappointment that happens. There's a reasonable expectation, or there's a reasonable disappointment that happens.
Can
Because
you tell me
why?
how the trailer starts? Can you tell me how the trailer starts?
I can't remember now.
It's with Nawe
not off the top of my head.
chasing down a guy, and then it goes to a field, and then we see Nawe hanging out with her dad, and then we see her people getting killed by Nobunaga soldiers, and then she tries to fight him. She gets knocked down. She's like, "Oh no, I'm sad," and then she looks over at her burning village, and only then does she see Yasuke. So from this, Nawe's the protagonist. Nawe's the person you're being introduced to. And I'm sure you'd agree that it wouldn't be an issue if there was only one protagonist, right? That wouldn't be a problem. So then what's the problem with there being an additional one? So if this had released and if it was only Nawe, if Nawe was the only person, that wouldn't have been an issue. But it's an issue because you have the option to play as a black guy as a secondary character.
When was do you have any sort of evidence of the first outrage that was spanned of Assassin's Creed Shadows? And when it was made clear that Yasuke is one of the two protagonists, were people immediately, even before they knew that Yasuke was a protagonist, were people immediately outraged? Or was it only once Ubisoft said Yasuke is the second protagonist, the samurai that you're going to be playing with?
Pretty apparent in the trailer, about halfway through.
Oh.
So like,
okay, so in other words,
and then they do like a split screen of like, oh, I guess we'll have to work together or whatever, and then you see them doing a mission together.
Okay, so in other words, my point
as a secondary
you
option.
could, and I'm not suggesting, right, for 1 second that you have to adhere to the Steelman. That's the whole point of a Steelman, is to allow someone to take the most good faith position against their opponent. You made an assumption in your video, or an accusation in your video, that people absolutely hated Yasuke purely because he is black.
Okay,
I just showed you that there is another interpretation of it.
So I disagree with that, because the reason I didn't give the Steelman you gave is that I think that's like a horrible Steelman, because I think that implicitly implies racism or sexism. It's one of those two things, because it's the only reason to be mad that there is a black man as an option. You expected a Japanese protagonist, you got it, you were shown that, so either you're mad that that is a woman, or you're mad that you got another option, that the option of being black exists. Those are the two things you can be mad about there. Do you understand that? Like, it's not, the reason I didn't give that as a Steelman is I think that's not a Steelman. I think that's just conceding you're racist or sexist, right?
Wait, how in the hell do you get from a game set in Japan, where you would expect to see Japanese characters play out the fantasy that you're hoping for,
and you
suddenly
get that in the trailer immediately. There is a black character.
Doesn't matter. Okay. There's a black character that's inserted here, outside of what you wanted. This is not what you wanted. You wanted your ultimate Japanese samurai fantasy that is now being shoehorned by a new political bend, right?
From Assassin's Creed.
Somehow,
the samurai fantasy from the stealth game.
Well, considering the last games that Assassin's Creed made, it wouldn't be impossible to expect, right? It would not be impossible to expect. And fundamentally, this is the hope that people have. And suddenly there's a black character. Now, a lot of people would rightfully go, why? This makes no sense. Like, this would be like announcing the next Black Panther movie. Let me ask you this.
Okay.
Let me ask you this. If the next Black Panther movie got announced and then suddenly the trailer comes out and the Black Panther is white, would you say that people would be righteous, or at least justified in going, dude, what the is this? We were expecting Denzel Washington or something, not this bullshit.
To make that analogous,
Black Panther isn't white.
The actual analogy would be Black Panther is black and there's a white side character. That would be the analogy. No one would be pissed about that because it doesn't matter.
Because Yasuke isn't presented as a side character. He's a dual protagonist. So he is an equal part of the story.
Let's go with this Black. I don't know anything about Black Panther. I'm just letting you know that full up front. But let's say they make a Black Panther game, right? And the main character at the opening of the trailer is Black Panther, and he's black, and he's cool, and he does whatever Black Panther does. And then there is a side character that is a white lady, I guess, to make it as offensive. I don't know, but it's a white lady, and then you can play as her in part of the game, and you work together with Black Panther. Would people be pissed? Or would they be like, oh, cool, I get to play as Black Panther. I wonder what this side character's about. They
No,
wouldn't say, oh, she's white, I'm mad. Like they did with Yasuke. That's the only thing they could be mad about.
No, but hold up. The reason I use Black Panther specifically as the example is to make you see that an expectation can destroy things. Oh, remember, Black Panther, the members of Black Panther were always very involved in American and European storylines. Japan, feudal Japan, the period that this takes place in, is still a very protected area. There is definitely outside influence, but it's very protected. Most of it would be Japanese. And the expectation from gamers listening and hearing that the next game is going to be set in Japan, because remember, the cinematic wasn't the first time people found out about this. They teased this a lot beforehand, that this is the next game that they're working on. There were all sorts of leaks and rumors going about. So obviously players had this incredible expectation of all the cool stuff that they're going to be able to do in this game with their Japanese samurai and their Japanese whatever, right? I mean, suddenly you see something that literally no ordinary human would have ever even asked for. No one wanted this.
Again, that's
and
not...
it's in the game. And you have to ask yourself at some point, why? Why put this into a game that no one cared about? Would the game have been worse or better with... Let me ask you this. Okay. Would the game have been worse with a Japanese samurai?
It would have depended on the character and how they wrote it. Like, the skin color doesn't change anything. That's what I'm saying. The skin color doesn't matter. But you're saying because he is black, it is therefore worse. That's the argument you just made. I just don't get it, dude.
Because there's a period in time, bro. Like, if it's modern day Japan and you have a black character there, obviously it's fine.
Was Yasuke real?
Yasuke was real, but an obscure as shit character.
That's fine. So, okay, maybe, if I'm going to be the best faith possible, you have the expectation that you're gonna get a Japanese samurai. You see it and you're like, what the fuck? Why is there a black... That doesn't make any sense. And then you look it up and you say, oh, it's a historical character? He's actually real? Okay.
Yeah, but that's
wow. I need to have less racist assumptions about the makeup of Japan. Minorities exist everywhere, I guess. That would be your conclusion.
Well, hold up. Well, dude, what you're asking for is, in other words, people should not want what they expected to see and instead change because minorities existed everywhere. You're talking about a super obscure character from history that no one knows anything about. And by the way, there's plenty of Japanese games that has had Yasuke in the game, but they have always portrayed him as a non-playable character, as either a boss in a game or as a companion character in a game. That's perfectly fine. No one would have been angry at that.
Why can he not be a playable character?
Why would he
be wrong? Because someone probably thinks he's an interesting character. I think he's an interesting character. I don't think they fully utilized him in the game, but I think his premise is really interesting.
No. Why would he be? Why wouldn't you just go with a Japanese character because that's where the game is taking place? Okay,
would a Japanese character
need a black samurai?
You don't need it, but why is it wrong to have it? If you had a Japanese samurai that, was in the he was like a slave before, and he came in, and then he got noticed by Lord Nobunaga, served Lord Nobunaga, had a completely mysterious life, but everyone thought he was cool back then or whatever, right? That character would be an interesting character. Why is that character not interesting? Because he is black. That is the deciding factor. That's the problem. Is that the only reason you can give me that he's not interesting is because he is black?
Yes, because he is in the wrong period of time in the wrong country.
He was there in reality. What do you mean?
It doesn't matter.
Yes, it doesn't matter
if he was. No, why does it matter?
Because why does it matter? It's reality that matters. I'm sorry. What?
You're making a video game for people to play. You're not making a game to tell the historical truth of Japan.
You're making a video game player expectations. Is that always wrong? Play. Is it always wrong to go against player expectations? You played the early Assassin's Creed games, right? Assassin's Creed 3.
Hold up.
Okay, I want to give you an example.
Yeah, no, wait. Just let me finish my thought, and then you can go nuts.
Okay, cool.
There are ways
I am getting animated, but like I can reel it back if you want. I'm having fun. It's up to you.
Do whatever you want to do. There are things, right? There are player promises that you can break, but core player promises tend to break games. If you break core player promises,
so you aren't breaking the core player promise. You have Notway. You have Japanese representation as the main character.
Oh, hold up. The issue here, right,
Uh-huh.
lies in I expected, and I'm just using I here as the sort of, whoever, right?
Sure, right.
Add whoever you want in there, right? But I expected to see a game set in Japan with Japanese protagonists because that's what I was looking forward to. That's what I wanted to play.
But wouldn't you have relatively
Suddenly,
expected a singular Japanese protagonist, right? Because it's Assassin's Creed and they haven't done dual protagonists since Syndicate, and that was only a one-time thing. So you'd expect to see a singular Japanese protagonist, and you see that. But then you have the extra option of an additional character, and you're mad because that additional character is black, right?
Yeah. Well, hold up. I don't care because as a player, because as a player, my immediate problem is why even put this character into the game? That's not what I want. I want a Japanese fantasy of playing in Japan and being this assassin and playing through this Japanese story. I don't care about a black character here.
You don't have to care.
Dude, if they just did Norway, people probably wouldn't have cared at all.
Why?
They could have just done Norway.
No, exactly.
Right?
Why? Why is this such a big deal? Why is it a big deal? Norway alone
because Norway is Japanese. Because Norway is Japanese, set in a Japanese game. That sort of makes sense to me. I don't know why.
Okay, so let's say
I think it's wild to expect that Japanese people would be present in Japan during feudal periods.
Let's go.
I don't know.
I'm going to do an analogy, and let's, I guess, calm down a little bit. But like, I don't want this to get too heated. But imagine you have like a meal, and you're like, "Oh, this meal is great. I like this meal. I'm satisfied with it." And someone's like, "Hey, I brought you an extra dessert cake. You can eat it if you want it or not, but you don't have to eat it." And then your response is, "Well, this has ruined the entire meal." That makes no sense. So in this analogy, Norway is the meal that you're really happy with on its own. That's fine. But the moment this cake comes in, then it's a problem. And why is this cake a problem? Because it's black. This is a weird analogy, but you understand what I'm saying.
Well, no, because the food analogy isn't. I never had an expectation of not getting a cake.
You didn't expect to get dessert. No, you ordered the meal. You expected to get the meal you ordered, and they brought you something extra that you were not expecting. Is it reasonable to be mad about that?
Well, again, I don't think necessarily when it comes to food. This is why I think that the analogy is somewhat awkward and weird.
Okay.
Because fundamentally, as a player, I just told you, right? My only issue here is that your immediate response is they didn't like Yasuke because of racism.
Well, because
you can have someone not be happy with Yasuke's inclusion in the game, and it not have anything to do with the fact that you hate black people.
You haven't given me a reason for it besides that, though.
Well, no. Well, dude, black racism, as someone that lives in South Africa that actually know racists, so not the inventative racism that the left seems to think they catch people out on.
Well, there are degrees of racism. Obviously, there's more extreme. This is a more mild form of racism.
There's degrees of people showing their racism, but there's no such thing as degree. Racists hate people from other colors.
Hitler was more racist than like, I don't know, some guy that just doesn't like black people. He's more racist because he tried to eliminate. Like, yeah, obviously, there's degrees of this.
Dude, fundamentally, right, as someone that lives in a country that has every shade of racism you can imagine, from black people hating white people hating black people, I can tell you there is a world in which someone may dislike the inclusion of Yasuke in the game and it not have anything to do with their hatred of black people, but rather that they didn't want a black person in their Japanese fantasy game. They wanted a Japanese person.
Because
why not?
Black. Because he's black.
In Japan.
You already have a Japanese person.
If he was black in Africa, it wouldn't matter. If he was black in Africa during that period, it would not have mattered. No one would have cared. What people are angry about is that they put a black character into a game where they expected to see a Japanese character.
So,
that's it.
Let's reset. Okay, so if you took a time travel machine, right, you went back to feudal Japan and you saw Yasuke, would it be an appropriate reaction to be mad because you didn't expect him to be there because you didn't know he existed? Would that be a valid thing? You're like, fuck you, you're not supposed to be here, Yasuke. Black people can't be here. Is that a valid reaction? Or would you be like, oh, I didn't know there were black people here?
But wait, aren't you again creating a sort of fallacious example, though?
Well, what I'm trying
because
to do
you're
is
now
extract your
because in
logic
that
and apply it
case,
to different situations
no,
because it doesn't work
no,
anywhere else. And it
no,
doesn't work
because
here.
you're saying, right, because Yasuke existed during some period, it makes perfect sense for him to be one of the
Yeah,
protagonists.
it does. It may not be what you expect.
What was
It may
the
not be what you
what
want.
was the
But
what was the
there's nothing
skin
wrong with
color?
it.
What was the skin color of 99.9% of the people in Japan during that period?
I don't know what you would describe Japanese people as skin color wise, but Japanese people.
They were Japanese, right?
Yeah.
So the expectation that you would play with a Japanese character
Which you
would
are.
not be unfounded or
It wouldn't
even
be.
in any way, shape, or form strange.
If they were
It would
like
be
both
perfectly
black
fine.
characters, I'd agree with you, but you have the Japanese people here. You have Nawe,
It
and she's the
doesn't.
lead.
It does not matter
Why does it not matter?
because
You're getting what you want. Your expectations are being met, and this is an extra thing.
But why is this the extra thing? Why not just do another Japanese character?
Because the people developing the game thought it was interesting. Because certain people they're marketing it to will think it's interesting. There are people that like Yasuke.
You see, and this is why you and I will never reach any point
Personally,
of
okay,
consensus. And the reason for it is you think, oh, it's just because they did something interesting. I do not think that this is just because they're
interesting. Evidence of that. That's the problem.
Yeah, but your only evidence that they think
that
it's
they
interesting
said
is because they say so.
Is that they said it and it's logically consistent.
Because they don't lie at all ever.
I'm not saying that. They can lie, sure.
Because they won't lie.
If you're going to if you're asserting the claim they lie, you have the burden of evidence. You have to prove that that is the case, and you haven't done that. You've just asserted that they lied and then said the reason that they gave, which tracks and is completely logical, is invalid. And I have no evidence to support that.
So a studio that is absolutely obsessed with DEI, a studio that can't stop celebrating DEI,
that's all circumstantial.
Makes a game. Makes a game set in Japan, where the natural expectation would be that you're going to play with Japanese people because why not? This is Japan after all. They then decide to make a black character. I go, ooh, that's interesting. So this studio that is obsessed with race and people of color decided to put a black person into their game for political reasons.
Okay.
And you're saying, no, that's not it. They said that it's not for political reasons. And I go, well, yeah, they obviously wouldn't admit that they just did it for political reasons because they would understand how racist that sounds.
Let's isolate
and you admitted that they wouldn't actually acknowledge it if it was true, right? So fundamentally, I would argue that your retort of my opinion is just as unsubstantiated.
Okay, so
because your retort is simply that they said it isn't that, even though they would never admit that they did it in the first place.
Let's isolate this. I think we can actually make some progress if we isolate it. So, okay. Separated from like the fact that it's Ubisoft, say it's just me, I'm the only person involved here, or you can make me some other person if you want me to. But I think Yasuke is an interesting character because he is, a fish out of water, I guess, and he is in service to one of the most powerful people in Japan at that time and provides an interesting perspective on Japan. And I think he's an interesting character. And I decide I'm going to write a book about him, or I'm going to make a game with him, or I'm going to do something like that. What is wrong with that logical chain? Where I say, oh, this is interesting, I'm going to make something about it. What is wrong with that?
Nothing at all.
So why can't it apply to Ubisoft?
Why can't I not like the fact that you did it and
I don't care
not read your book or play your video game
and
say that I don't like it? Yeah, oh.
But
so in other words,
the reason you wouldn't like it is because he's black. That would be the reason.
Because when you told me that you're making a game set in feudal Japan, I was hoping to see Japanese people. You didn't give me Japanese people. So I said, well, I'm not playing.
And everyone else in the game is Japanese.
But I expected to only play with Japanese people.
Are you mad
I didn't expect to suddenly see.
Are you mad about the Portuguese being in the game? There are Portuguese in the game. There's white guys in the game. Is that a problem?
Oh, can you play them?
No. So it's only playable.
No, then it's fine.
But so what if one of the Portuguese people was an extra playable character? There was like a sequence, if you remember the old games, like a short sequence.
No, I wouldn't. No. Why would you do that?
You would be mad
I want,
that you could play as a white guy for one sequence. What if it strengthens the storytelling? What if it strengthens the storytelling?
Hey, if Yasuke was literally just played for a single mission because you wanted to show his side of things, that would be a different story. But
That's the
let's not
case.
break away here.
That's the
Let's not break
case.
away here.
You don't have to play
No,
him.
no.
You play him for
Yeah.
the
Oh,
intro, and you play him for his
whoa.
prologue mission, all of which takes like 2-3
Yeah.
hours. That's all you ever have to touch him for.
So in other words, you're admitting that he is a token character.
No.
Then why do you have him in the game? Everyone expected to play the Japanese character.
So by that
you made
logic,
a new
by that logic, isn't Nawe a token character? Because you can do the opposite and play Yasuke for the majority, making Nawe.
Actually, if you play the intro of the game, you very quickly realize that Nawe is the main driver of the entire story.
Okay.
Yasuke is literally just a side character presented as a main protagonist. Again, we come back to the thing of this character should have been Japanese because it is a game set in Japan,
and
played
so
by.
Yasuke was in Japan.
I just it doesn't matter because that's not what I wanted to play. The fundamental point here, right, is that what you want is to say, look, gamers, you must accept this.
No, what I'm saying is, if you immediately say this character fucking sucks because he is black and that is the only reason you have, that is racism.
Bro, like, can you just let me finish a thought? You're saying unless you like this character, you're racist. You have to like this character, or at least accept this character.
You can't.
But when gamers say,
can I elaborate? That's not my position.
Wait, no, you can elaborate in a second.
Okay.
But the second gamers say, "What the hell is this? This is not what we wanted. This is bullshit." Then you go, well, you could only dislike this if you're racist.
No, that's not what I said. To be clear, my position isn't that you can't. Okay. So, what your reaction to Yasuke as a neutral would be is, okay, I don't know anything about this guy. I have no idea if he's interesting. And then you find out more about him, and you're like, I'm not interested in his story. Being actively mad about it because he is black, the only reason you can be actively mad because he is black is because of racism. You can be like not interested. You can be like, who's Yasuke? Oh, he's some black samurai that did okay, I don't really care that much. That's fine. But that's not the position. The position is it is a problem. It is a bad thing, and I am mad about it. And what I'm trying to get you to articulate is why him being black makes it bad. You aren't saying it makes it neutral, I don't care anymore. But because I'm particularly interested in Japanese stories, that's not what you're saying. What you're saying is that him being black is bad enough to make me mad and justify hating this game.
Well, because he's
ignore
not
the
supposed
hating this
to
game
be
part. That's
the main.
extra.
He's not supposed to be the main character in a game taking place in feudal Japan.
He's not.
Right?
He's not.
He's one of the two protagonists.
He's the
fundamentally he is one of the
protagonists.
We both know that that's not how it was presented.
Yes, it was.
Not at the start. No.
Nawe
he was
gets
one
the
of
original
the two
intro.
protagonists.
Nawe gets the original. Nawe gets the intro.
Yeah.
They both go on missions, but Nawe is the main character, very clearly from the trailer.
Are they both protagonists, yes or no?
Yeah, they're both protagonists. One's bigger than the other.
All right. No worries. But both of them are presented as protagonists.
Yes, absolutely.
Gamers can absolutely look at that and say, and I should just mention, originally, right? And I am someone that followed this reasonably closely towards the end, not at the beginning. At the beginning, I was still focusing mostly on World of Warcraft stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if my memory serves me right, now we are going back quite a bit here, right? 3-4 years almost to the very first announcement of the game. The original thing was people just being ultra mega confused. Not really sure what the hell was going on here. It wasn't until Ubisoft started with their insistence that this is a historically accurate character, and I showed you the screenshot yesterday of the podcast that they did where they were insisting that this is an actual samurai, and it was actual, that people started to get more and more upset. Right, about this character,
and I have counter arguments. I don't really care to get into that right now. But so is your position? You're telling me that everyone was confused, but then everybody went and looked and saw that podcast description and then got mad.
I think people got mad as time went on.
That's absurd,
because
dude. You know
this
that's
is
absurd.
not what they wanted. Dude,
Yeah, so, okay,
I'm telling you, right? This is just based on my recollection
there was
of
a
it.
black person.
But
you could have been
what
confused.
I
You could have been like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. But to then turn that into being mad, whatever. I don't know.
So are you saying, dude? Are you saying that gamers can't be angry when companies make stupid decisions that they don't agree with?
Why is it a stupid decision? Why don't you agree with it?
Because no one wanted this.
People did, sure.
No one was asking for it.
Is there a single person in the world, possibly, that is like, Yasuke is my favorite historical figure. I think he's really cool. I know it's probably not going to happen, but man, I hope Assassin's Creed Shadows features him as a playable character. Is there one person in the world that could have thought that?
Maybe, sure.
Okay, so
I'm sure there are one
you're saying
person.
the
But if
game
you're
needs to
making
play
a
to my
video game,
preference.
you're obviously not trying to make it for the one person, right? That
Well,
would be
no.
stupid. You're
You can
trying to make
argue
it
it's
for
a
as
stupid
many
marketing
people as
decision. I don't
possible.
really care if you think it's a stupid marketing decision. What I'm trying to get to is, why is it okay, or not why is it okay? What is the problem with his existence?
There's no problem with his existence.
But
There's
there
a
is, 'cause you
problem
all
with
are mad
making
about it.
him. No.
Mhm.
There's no problem with Yasuke's existence. I just told you there are games that have Yasuke in it. He's never a playable character
what's his
because he is
what's
such
the
a
problem with
small
his existence
person in
in this
history.
game?
Because he is such a small person in history, no one wanted to play him. He's not
That's
a
not
character
true.
that people, the
We
majority
just
of people,
accepted there
didn't
was
want to
one
play him.
guy out there that wanted to play as Yasuke.
All right. All right, let's put it this way. Of the possible 3 million people that ended up playing this game, maybe there was a small percentage of people that actually ended up playing with Yasuke,
Mhm.
right? And that's great.
Is
But
there a percentage of
those
them that were
people-
like, didn't
no,
expect
I-
Yasuke, didn't have any idea who he
so-
was, played
so,
the game,
in
thought he
other
was
words,
interesting, and were like, oh, I'm glad we went with Yasuke?
So
Is that possible?
are you suggesting, in other words, that when Ubisoft announced that they're making an Assassin's Creed in Japan, that there were a significant portion of people who went, man, I can't wait to play Black Samurai?
No, it's not a significant portion. I've
Oh.
never said that. You're saying no one has ever had that opinion, which is what I'm pushing back on, because it's absolutist and it's wrong. But no, obviously the majority of people were not expecting and were not wanting to play a Black Samurai. That wasn't like the expectation. No, of course not. The
And
expectation was to play.
Your
no.
assertion is that the
Okay, let
fact
me-
that they don't want to play
Mm-mm,
Black
nope.
Samurai is because they're racist.
Nope. So the expectation was to play as a Japanese protagonist in an Assassin's Creed game. That was the expectation. That expectation is met by Nawe. If Nawe wasn't here, I would be with you. I would be like, why in the fuck did you make an Assassin's Creed game and make the only protagonist a black guy? That's fucking wild, Ubisoft. What the fuck? But that's not what happened. He's a secondary character. That expectation was satisfied. The only expectation that isn't satisfied is, I don't want to see black people. That's the one that isn't satisfied. That's the expectation that you're going against.
Again, if Yasuke was just a side character that you couldn't play, he was just in the game, I guarantee you no one would have been angry.
So,
But
why
let's
does it matter
let's
that
make
he's a
this. Let's make this.
wait,
I will
sorry.
explain this to you.
Okay, I think I might have a line of questioning that might get us somewhere. If they did a reveal shot of, wait, what?
I said I doubt that it will get us somewhere,
okay,
but go for it.
I thought you said outed, and I was like, what? That's okay. But anyway, oh fuck, now I forgot the line of questioning. Oh, okay, so if they did the reveal trailer and it was just Nawe, they didn't mention Yasuke at all, and they were like, oh, by the way, we have a playable black side character that you don't have to play in the main game at all. He's just there. You can choose to play as him. Do you think people would still be mad?
Yeah, I think so.
So why, if he's an extra, if he's an optional thing, why is it a problem that there's a black person?
Okay, let me add another thing in here. You yourself said that you didn't like Ubisoft going more RPG with the genre,
no, I hate
right?
it. I hate it so much.
Okay, so RPGs require a level of immersion, right? There needs to be some immersion because there's romance and there's all sorts of choices and stuff, and Ubisoft really wants to go deep on the choice thing.
Right, yeah.
So you're a player, right?
Mm-hmm.
That wants to play this game. You're super looking forward to it. They just announced Nawe is the one protagonist that you can play with, and you're going, man, I want to play as a male character because I really want to immerse myself in this game to the fullness of it. And now they announced the Black Samurai, and you're like, dude, what the hell? I was looking forward to playing a Japanese character. The only way I can now play this Japanese character is if I play with a female character, which now makes all of the romance options pretty awkward because I don't want to make... I don't want a big buff dude, having sex with me. I was looking forward to having a Japanese dude that I could charm some of the Japanese ladies with and sort of, go around doing stuff. So this is another reason why people may have been angry. So not only did you completely ruin the expectation that people had, they were going to be playing with a Japanese character, but the only way that they can actually get their specific fantasy is if they either play with a character that they never wanted to see in the game in the first place as a playable character because that's in Japan, or they have to play with a female character, which they not.
So okay,
yeah, but Yasuke.
what's your
Again,
favorite
we're talking
Assassin's
about
Creed
player
game?
expectations.
Like, if
We're
you had
talking about player expectations, right?
Okay.
What is a player expecting to see in the game? Oh shit! I'm gonna play this RPG set in Japan. I can't wait to play a male samurai or a male ninja or whatever, right? And I'm gonna have so much fun playing this game. But now that decision has been taken away from me because if I want to roleplay,
is the expectation I cannot see black people in this trailer? Is that expectation potentially racist because there were black people in Japan?
Wait,
maybe
no
not
one
specifically racist, but born of ignorance.
No one said that they don't want to see black people in the trailer.
That's what everyone's mad about. Yeah,
dude, everyone is mad that if they want to have the fantasy that they expected to play, then they either have to play with a character that they did not fantasize playing with, or they have to play with a female character that limits their ability to really immerse themselves in the world because they're playing with a character that they have no interest in going down the romantic lines with. They're playing with a character that isn't their main gender. So fundamentally,
is Assassin's Creed Origins, the Egypt one, if you don't know which one that is, Assassin's Creed Origins a bad game because it's an RPG and you only play as Bayek, you don't have a female option. And so a woman might have wanted to play that game and they can't fully immerse themselves in ancient Egypt because they have to play as a guy. Is it a bad game now?
Well, I would argue from the numbers itself, it doesn't matter what the women want to do. The game would still sell because there's far more men that play these games than women. So
shouldn't you be
would be irrelevant?
Okay, so what I care about isn't like which market sells the best. What I care about is the principle of the thing. And what you just demonstrated is that you don't hold the same principle. You don't care if women are represented. You only care if your demographic is represented.
No. Hold up. I don't care about any representation whatsoever. I care about a game being true to what it sets out to be, right? And
you were just explaining the argument that if you had to play as a female or a black person, which did not match your expectations, and you couldn't fully immerse yourself because you're not black and you're not a woman.
Yeah,
that was a problem.
And
you need representation.
Hold up.
You need representation.
Because I expected to play as a specific character. I'm not Hispanic, by the way. And yet, when I play Cyberpunk 2077, I always play the default V.
Yeah, so what
who is the Hispanic V. So I don't give a shit about the representation. What I care about is
this standard
when I heard,
is what I'm saying.
When I heard that you're making a game set in feudal Japan, I had this fantasy in my head of playing with a Japanese samurai or with a Japanese ninja or whatever, right? And that's what I'm going to be playing. And I was super looking forward to it. And then you announce the game. You have the female samurai ninja, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have the black samurai. But that does not match the expectation that I had or wanted for the game. Of course, I'm upset because you have now shoehorned me into a position where either I accept this asinine choice that you made that doesn't serve any real purpose outside of something, because we can't seem to agree on what that purpose actually should be, or I have to play as a female character. It's an interesting character according to you and according to about 3 million other people. The other gamers did not agree with that. So fundamentally, it's a character that is made on purely asinine reasons, added into a game that the majority of people did not really care for. Or I have to play as a female character, which again, I don't really care for because I want to play the male samurai fantasy.
If that is the case, it is equally as problematic if they had Nawe as only the protagonist. But you said that would be completely fine, and that's not an issue. This logic that you're appealing to is not being applied consistently. You understand? What I'm...
Hold the phone, right?
I'm holding the phone.
It would have been a very risky decision if they only had Nawe. This is the same argument I made for The Witcher 4. Making an RPG where romance and everything is involved, and then you have this the black samurai, but that does not match the expectation that I had or wanted for the game. So fundamentally, it would have been a very risky decision if they only had Nawe. This is the same argument I made for The Witcher 4. Making an RPG where romance and everything is involved, and not having a character selector becomes tricky, right? Cyberpunk got around this by creating a V. V is completely gender neutral, so you can be male or female V. The story is exactly the same. But if you're doing a sort of RPG with only a female character, we have to go, because you keep saying, I don't care about the market and the sales and stuff of that nature, but you have to care about that because a studio has to sell copies. Now, if we were to go and look at the demographics of gamers around the world, most people like to claim that it's about 50-50, which it isn't. It's about 56-44, 44% women, 56% men. However, if we exclude mobile, because about 66% of all women play mobile exclusively, they don't play on PC or console. So if we exclude that, you have a insignificant amount of women actually playing games on console or PC for whom this game would be made, right? And now you're making a game that only has a female protagonist, which is supposed to be an RPG. So you're already going to limit the number of players that would even pick up this game significantly, right? Because I don't want to immerse myself into a game through a female's eyes. I want to play a man character.
Could Ubisoft appeal to more people if rather than making this Assassin's Creed set in Japan, they made it Assassin's Creed set in Japan and Aztec America? They would have appealed to more people, would have gotten more people interested. They would have made more.
Repeat the question. Sorry, I missed.
If you basically took two Assassin's Creed games, jammed them together, you had Assassin's Creed Japan and Assassin's Creed Aztec stuff, because Aztec's like the second most requested. It's the one I want. I'm biased, but okay, if you shove those two together, you appeal to more people. So why didn't they do that? It's bad that they didn't do that, right?
Well, it would be a maze. It would be a maze because the story would be all over the place.
Maybe they could have
hold up. But wait a second, bro. There is a reasonable appeal to as many people as possible, right? And then there's unreasonable, because if we're gonna go with that, why didn't Ubisoft make an RTS, a shooter, and an Assassin's Creed game all in one?
Exactly.
That would have appealed to the vast majority of people, right?
My point
but
is
fundamentally,
that
there is a cutoff to this.
Isn't important.
No, of course it is. You want to sell copies.
Yes, obviously from a business perspective, you want to sell it to enough people to...
Yeah. Game development is fundamentally about one thing, and that is meeting player expectations.
No, but it's not.
Players have an expectation. Of course it is. Otherwise, no one's buying your game. Your game goes bankrupt. So what's the point?
You want to interest people and then provide a fun experience. Like, fans have...
By meeting their expectations.
No, okay. Ignore that this is part of a franchise. Say this is just a game that came out. People don't have expectations for it. And you're saying, this is what I'm offering. You aren't meeting expectations. You're offering an experience. That's what every video game is. You offer an experience and say, hey, would you like to experience this? You're allowed to say no.
Wait, this is false now, because you can't say ignore that this is part of a franchise, because now you're ignoring the incredible excitement and anticipation that the community had for a game set in Japan. So if a game comes out that is completely new and not part of a series, no one has any expectations yet. So fundamentally, you can do whatever you want there.
Are you equally mad that they didn't revamp the parkour system? Because that's what old AC fans want. But they didn't do that. So that, they could have appealed to more old AC fans by revamping the parkour.
That may have been a contributing factor to people going, well, I'm not going to pick this up because it looks like shit.
Like the heavily simplified parkour. So there's no matter what you do, you're going to lose some people, gain others.
Yeah, 100%. But then there's also fundamental things. Like, we're going to make a game set in Japan. I wonder what the player base thinks they're going to be playing. I doubt it's a Black Samurai.
And that's not what they're going to be playing. They're going to be playing Nawe, a assassin.
In an RPG,
and then they're also where I offer them...
Yeah, but in an RPG where I offer them a choice between male and female, but the male option is the one option that no one expected to ever be playing. And my only problem with this entire line of questioning, because I see we're getting nowhere, we're just going in circles.
Yeah, we're going in circles.
My only issue here is that you insist that this is purely based on racism and nothing else.
Because you aren't giving
people are only hating this because it's racist.
You're saying people are not expecting this. But
I gave you an alternative.
I'm okay with people not expecting it. I fully concede and accept that people did not expect Yasuke to be a playable character in Assassin's Creed Shadows.
Yeah, they didn't want a black samurai. They wanted a Japanese samurai. Why not? This is a game set in feudal Japan. No, not no one, but very few people heard feudal Japan and thought, shit, Black Samurai, let's go. So obviously it doesn't have anything to do with racism. It has to do with the fact that the majority of people did not expect that as the character that they were going to be playing.
And you can argue
then
that's a bad financial decision, but you can't argue that it is a bad, horrible decision that makes the game awful.
But it does, because that's not what people want, and therefore you're making a game that people don't want.
Okay, did you play Assassin's Creed 3? Did you play that one at all?
Yeah, I think so.
So do you remember how you have the spoilers for Assassin's Creed 3, I guess, guys, but you had the intro with Haytham Kenway, and people were like, I don't know what this is. I expected to be playing as Connor. But then it turned out that Haytham was actually a Templar. And you're like, oh shit, that was cool. And then you play as Connor, and then you get this whole build-up, and the story comes together because you've seen both sides of this, and it's stronger as a result of it. Obviously, you can nitpick the pacing of it, but like, that was not what people expected when they booted the game. But it's a good prologue. It's a good thing that they included that. It made the game better. So what I'm saying is that you're dismissing Yasuke potentially being a good thing that can make the game better, or be a neutral and not make the game worse, before playing it. Because he is black, which is racism.
Because he is black, in a specific period of time,
a
specific country, where if dude, shit existed. Why didn't they make shit playable?
Because shit isn't a person. Wait, what?
Like, if we're gonna be talking about stuff that existed, tree existed. Why couldn't you be a tree? Just because someone,
are you serious? If right now? Is that actually an argument? What?
Yes, because you're making a completely silly argument of saying, he did exist, so clearly he can be a playable character.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you,
he existed, and because he's black, he therefore can't be playable?
If I took you to Japan during this period of time and I showed you around, how many black people would you see?
Probably none.
There we go.
But that comes down to expectation. There was a black person. That doesn't make that reality.
Doesn't matter. What would you see if I took you to Japan during this period of time?
Why is it invalid for there to be a black character? Why is it invalid for there to be a character that isn't the majority? To apply that standard, let's go back to AC3. Connor shouldn't have been a protagonist because he was a Native American, and there were a lot more white people. If I took you around colonial America, you'd see a bunch of white people, so why are we playing as Connor?
So you're saying there weren't a lot of Native Americans in America?
Oh, there were, but they aren't heavily featured in the game. You're mainly in cities. You mainly see white people. If I showed you around these locations, you'd expect to see a white person, and Native Americans being in a city is that's pure racism, dude. Like, this is the argumentation you're applying.
Yeah, but wait, do you not notice how your own argument is shooting your own argument now in the foot?
Show me.
Because no one were angry about it.
Yes, they were.
No one was angry that you played a Native American.
Yeah, they were. People hated Connor. Connor's probably the most hated protagonist up until like fucking Unity.
Did they hate? So they hated Connor because he was Native American, not because of writing or pacing issues or anything. It was literally just because you're Native
American. There are people that had issues with his writing and all that other stuff. There were pure racism. Okay. There was pure racism though. Like obviously, there's always going to be plausible deniability in any situation like this. Obviously.
I just need to point out, right? If we're gonna go off the one case of that one bad uncle screaming at the barbecue, then you're always gonna find racism everywhere you go. We're talking about can you provide actual evidence that the pure reason people were hating Connor was because he was a Native American? Because I'm telling you, your own argument is currently destroying your argument.
No, it's not.
Because your own argument shows people played that game and they had no problem with the fact that there was a Native American, because Native Americans were very prominently available in America at the time. And so it fits the story. Whereas if I took you to Japan, in the cities, in the countryside, wherever I took you, you would be hard-pressed to find a black person outside of Yasuke. Right? So, yeah, if you happen to run into this one black guy that happens to be the one protagonist that they choose to go with.
Okay, question. How did Yasuke get to Japan? He was brought over in the slave trade. They had black slaves. Part of the Jesuits. They had black slaves.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were other black people. They were slaves for the most part. Yasuke's like the one person that rose above that.
I mean, the whole premise would be that the slaves would probably not spend a lot of time outside of wherever they kept their slaves, right? So even there,
Maybe, I don't know.
the vast majority of people you would see would be Japanese. We're all talking, what we're talking about is player expectation.
So if you hide black people in a basement, you then can't make them in a video game?
Mhm.
If you hide back black people in the basement, you can walk around a street and be like, oh, look, it's all not black people, then having black people in that setting is invalid.
Wait, dude, why are you, like, I genuinely ask you, why are you constantly coming up with these inflamed examples?
The reason I'm doing inflamed
What
examples...
What we're talking about
do you want to know,
is player expectation. Okay. No. I'll listen to you now. I just want to lay out so that you understand. What I don't get, right, is
the reason
you seem to be confused as to what the purpose of video games is. The purpose is to sell copies. That's it. That's the purpose of
the company. The purpose of the video game is to create a fun experience.
No, the truth is that even the first games that were made to be fun, and yes, there was a lot of passion in it, but it was still to make money. They weren't making those games because they just
for the company,
wanted to put out
not the
games.
Individuals.
No, even the individuals thought that they're going to be making a lot of money if they make this game this way. But it was always about meeting player expectation. What am I putting out and what will make the players play it? This means that as a game company, I need to figure out...
What will make the players play it isn't meeting player expectation. That's enticing the player. That's a whole different thing. That's what I've been saying. You need to entice the player into playing the game.
You entice the player into meeting their expectation. Meeting a player's expectation is how you entice me.
Something can be awesome because it breaks your expectation. Something can be awesome because it breaks the expectation. So,
yeah, but bro, again,
for example... I love stealth games. I always have, right? My favorite game ever made is Dishonored. Have you played Dishonored at all? Do you know anything about it?
Yeah.
So when I played Dishonored, I was used to like very rigid stealth games where you didn't have much freedom in your approach. Going into Dishonored, I expected that it would be very rigid. But Dishonored is like insane. You can like use all these magical abilities and it gives you so much freedom in how you approach it. I didn't know I wanted that. I never could have asked for that. But by playing it, I was like, oh shit. This is way better than my expectations. This is awesome. This is my favorite game ever, where it remains to this day. But it's that way because it shattered my expectations.
Could you stealth in the game?
And you can play as a Japanese person. Okay. Specifically, if we're talking about setting player expectations, right? The player expectation, in your view, was that you would get to play as a Japanese samurai, right?
Yeah.
And... there would have been less outrage if Nawe had been the only playable character, correct?
Yeah, I think there would have been more disappointment, less outrage.
Okay. But isn't having Yasuke as a playable samurai closer to the expectation? So shouldn't it be, right, that there is the most outrage that there isn't a playable samurai, less outrage that it's not a Japanese samurai, and then even less outrage if it is a Japanese samurai, because if that's the expectations we're going off of. But okay, so the reason it's not is because of the black thing. That's the thing. It's if you're saying what we need to do is match expectations, these are very weighted differently to where him being black is way more negative than if he had never been there in the first place. But the question for that is, why is it worse for a black person to be there than for him to have never been there in the first place? The only real reason I can think of that you've yet to give me a reason that articulates it.
I've given you
racism.
Plenty of reasons, bro. The issue is that you don't. No, of course you haven't. The problem is that you desperately want it to be about race, and so every example, every single argument I've given you. That shows you
saying it's about expectations. That logic isn't tracking with the reality of what we're seeing. That the outrage that you would expect if the issue was that it's not meeting expectations, you would expect it to be in that order I mentioned. But because that order is swapped, that means that there is some element here that's not being accounted for.
No, because again, you're seeing what you want to see. Not what is actually happening. If players only had Norway, right? And clearly there were a lot of people.
Why would I want that?
Hold up. I think because it fits your worldview that people are racist.
You're
and
assuming I'm an
therefore
extreme
all of this
leftist.
stuff is
You're
required.
assuming that, but I'm not.
It doesn't matter what I assume, because from everything that we've spoken about here, you seem at least desperate to catch the boogeyman. Like that, this
No.
has to be about racism.
No, I'm
Instead
annoyed because as an
of being
Assassin's Creed
far more,
fan, I've seen this get co-opted
yeah,
by racists. That's the reason I'm mad, is because I love this franchise, and seeing this
exactly.
entire discourse get dominated by this conversation.
You see, but that's
is-
exactly the
stems from
problem. You
racism.
keep thinking that it's racism when I'm telling you it's not.
But then that logic doesn't align with reality. That's the problem. You have so
The
if
logic
you are going
perfectly
to
aligns.
provide, it does not.
The logic perfectly aligns, because here's what you seem to keep missing.
Okay, I'm
You
going to try to get it this time.
right? You keep saying that Yasuke, because he's black,
Yep.
that's why people don't like him. But you miss one little part of your sentence.
Okay.
Yasuke, being black in a game set in Japan, is a problem. That in a game set in Japan
then the
changes the nature
it's the
of people's outrage.
But you
But
yourself
that's
have
the point,
admitted that
right?
you
People are-
yourself expected you yourself said that if racism it's not sorry you yourself said that if Nawe wasn't or if sorry I'm losing the plot here, if Yasuke wasn't included at all, that would be preferable to him being there. But if the expectation is that you get to play as a Japanese samurai, Yasuke being there is fulfilling half of that expectation. So the outrage should be lesser, not more.
It's half of the expectation.
Okay, but
set
half
on completely the wrong character.
If you have
because that's not what people wanted.
Okay, again, so if it's set on the wrong character, then the core issue here is that he's black. It's not about the samurai thing. It's about the fact that he's black.
Okay,
That's what it comes back. That's what I'm saying.
Say exactly that. Say exactly that, and then just add, he's black in feudal Japan.
Which he was a real character, and he was there.
Yeah, in feudal Japan.
But then okay, what your player expectation?
Play with a black character. You would not. This is all that matters. What do players think they're going to be playing? They're going to be playing Japanese characters. If you then give them a black character that they expected to play with Japanese characters, you've screwed up. End of discussion.
Can someone have racist expectations?
I'm sure.
So
why would this be racist?
If I'm going to be a racist person,
a racist expectation.
If I go down the street and I see a black person, I'm like, oh, they're going to commit a crime. That's racist, right? Presuming they're doing normal shit. That would be racism.
Yeah.
I have an expectation that is rooted in racism. The expectation of only being acceptable to play a Japanese person is rooted in racism. And not being okay with an alternative because it is black, to where that alternative is worse than nothing.
Okay, so this is where we have a serious divergence of reality. So the expectation that I will play as a Japanese character in a game set in Japan is somehow racist.
No, the expectation that you cannot play as a black samurai in Japan is.
It's the same thing.
So, no, it's not. Okay, so one is exclusive, one is exclusive.
Thing.
One is exclusive.
No, it boils down to the same thing. I don't want to play as a black samurai in a Japanese game set in feudal Japan, because that wasn't what I wanted to sign up for. That wasn't what I was looking forward to. And then to have the developers of this game call me a racist and have the media call me a racist because I don't want to play this game.
That's a whole other...
That creates an extra bit of problem for me, because now, not only, and by the way, even if we don't even include the which is also a thing that you seem to say isn't true, but it is true, the developers absolutely did do that. But even if we exclude the developers from doing that, after the players said, look, I don't want to play as a black samurai, I was hoping to play with a Japanese character, the media immediately came out with the chuds, the gamers, all caps, they're all racist idiots because they don't want to play as a black character. So of course, players are going to get even more agitated, they're going to get even more angry, they're going to get even more vitriolic. Why? because they're being attacked for something that has nothing to do with racism. It has to do with the fact that you announced a game set in Japan and you gave me not the fantasy that I was hoping to get from this game. And when I expressed that I don't like this particular fantasy, you called me a racist.
Why do you not like this fantasy? What's different about it?
Because I don't want to play as a black character in feudal Japan.
Why? Why is that a problem?
Because it's set in feudal Japan. I want to play as a Japanese
He was there.
character.
It's historically accurate for him to be there.
Yeah, shit was there as well. Why am I not playing with a shit stain?
That's again. This is not. You're resorting to an inanimate object that's not even remotely comparable.
No, you're saying because he existed, you should be able to play with him. I'm telling you, when people hear feudal Japan, they're not thinking black people.
I'm not saying you should play with him. If Yasuke was not in the game, I wouldn't be mad. I'm saying it's not a bad thing that you can.
I'm telling you that if a player says, I don't want to play as a black samurai, that is not racism. That is him saying, I was looking for something else, and this is not what you gave me. I don't like it. And then to be called racist over and over again
is
just unfounded.
If the reaction was, oh man, I was hoping to play as a Japanese samurai, I'm disappointed by this fact, but hey, maybe Yasuke will be cool. If that was the reaction, that wouldn't be racist. The racist part is when
why must I say maybe Yasuke would be cool? Why must I add that little disclaimer?
You don't have to. Maybe the disclaimer then is Yasuke, but I don't really have strong opinions about Yasuke. When the strong opinion about Yasuke is he is black, so that makes it actively worse than having nothing. What is the mechanism that is causing that disparity? Because if you're just going by expectations, Yasuke meets more expectations than just having Nawe, so it should be better, but you yourself admitted that this is worse than it would be if we just had Nawe.
I don't see how
what is that mechanism?
Dude, because when Ubisoft announces Assassin's Creed Nigeria, no one is going to expect a Japanese character.
But okay,
and so if a Japanese character
was a black character that was the main character, there was a playable Japanese character, do you think people would be annoyed? Like they would be furious? This seems to be supposed to apply to this scenario. Go ahead.
Look, you make your arguments and then you keep interrupting me. So just before you, because
to be clear, you have talked a lot more in this conversation in totality than I have. You have. So
don't listen to reply. Just listen to what I'm saying. If Ubisoft announced, right, Assassin's Creed Nigeria, people wouldn't expect to play as a white character or as a Japanese character. They would expect to play as a black character. And if that is given, people would be fine with that.
And then what if there was a secondary option that was like a white?
Why would you add a secondary character? This is the whole point. Why would you do it?
It's a really interesting character that the writers thought was interesting.
Hold up. We could talk about the success of that game. Yeah. I would argue that game will probably not be that successful because there's not that many black people in the West. And if you're making a game for Africa, you're shut out of luck. Most Africans don't have computers or consoles. They're not playing video games.
I know I live plenty of people that would be interested in Assassin's Creed Africa. That would be a cool ass setting. I'm white as fuck, and that would be cool.
Yeah, I'm sure you would, right?
I don't
but
need
I
people
can
to be my
guarantee you
same
would probably
skin color to like the game. But also,
dude,
the majority of people aren't Japanese. The majority of people aren't Japanese. So why is Japan appealing where Africa wouldn't be?
Because Japan is
not black people. This is what it all comes back to again and again.
Please stop being like this. Like, holy shit. Japan is one of those countries that is marred in mystery and sort of exoticism. That's why people have always wanted it, because Assassin's Creed just speaks so incredibly well to that era of Japan. People have wanted this since forever. So people had expectations going into it. Ubisoft is the one that broke those expectations. When the players then got annoyed that these expectations were not met, at least the media turned around and called them racist for it. And then they got angrier, and the fight intensified, And eventually we reach the point where the game, in my opinion, crashes and burns because it has not made any money. Fundamentally, no matter how you slice it, this has nothing to do with racism. It has to do with a fundamental failure to understand what your audience wants and then giving them what they want, because that's ultimately the point of making a game. You want to make sure that your audience gets what they ultimately want. That's it. That's the end of it. If you want to shoehorn racism into it, please go for it. But I don't think you and I are going to get anywhere. So I will give you the final word, and then we'll end the call.
I guess the final thing I will say is I really appreciate you having this conversation in the first place. I know we've been heated. We've talked over each other. We've all that fun stuff. But these conversations I find them interesting and all that stuff. And hopefully I've been the one lefty that isn't absolutely vile. Hopefully I'm a little bit above that standard. But regardless, for overall, I'll just recap the latest thing because I think trying to recap this whole argument would be too much. But specifically for this, just my issue and the thing that I am not understanding that I think is the example of racism is that we're arguing currently that expectation is the thing driving the reaction. And if the expectation is that you play as a Japanese samurai, playing as a black samurai should be better than playing as no samurai. And yet, this reaction is significantly worse than if you had no samurai at all. If you had just had Nawe, or you can play as a male or female Nawe, whatever. Which means that the thing that is changing in that is throwing off the calculus to where the expectations are not what we would expect if this was truly just regular expectations of wanting to play as a Japanese samurai. What's throwing that off is that rather than playing as a black samurai being, okay, well, at least I get to play as a samurai, it's actively a deterrent. It's actively a negative. And there is only one reason that I can think of that was been presented to me that reaction is misaligning with what you would expect there. And then for my final thing, again, our games, woke, whatever, there are certainly some, sure, whatever. Realistically, there's no evidence that Ubisoft put Yasuke in the game because he is black. There is no evidence to that fact. They have claimed the opposite. They have claimed that they thought he was an interesting character, something which I think even you admitted at some point in here is a logical train of thought. You can think that he is an interesting character. You don't have to agree with it, but he's a figure shrouded in mystery, and he's got lots of cool stuff that you can do with him, especially for a historical fiction franchise that likes to play with their characters and do things that break from reality a lot. It loves doing that. So for that, Yasuke was a really interesting blank slate that could provide a good counterpoint to Nawe. And I think that argument as to why they would include Yasuke is far more compelling and far more interesting than, oh, it's DEI, he is black, because that is reductive and it just confirms a worldview. Also, I will say as the final thing, to chat, I don't know what you all, I haven't looked at chat at all this entire time, but if you all want to come challenge me or whatever, or have a discussion, feel free. Discord links in my video, whatever. And then, I think that's really it for me. Yeah. But I appreciate you having this conversation, Echo. I know we got heated and all that fun stuff, but I think it's good to have these conversations, whether we agree or not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for coming out, man. Really appreciate you and appreciate you taking the time and wanting to engage in the debate.
Did I rise above vile? Am I the best leftist you've ever interacted with?
You're definitely better than almost all of the leftists I've ever met. Well, I hope in time that I can, I hate to use the language of your side, but I hope in time that I can help deprogram you a little. So that you can
I would appreciate it.
The issue, I think more clearly, because I do think you're in some ways maybe captured a little by a worldview that might not seem as bad as it is on the surface, but we didn't really get to that stuff, and it is really close, right? Yeah. So fundamentally, I still appreciate you coming out here. Thank you, man. It was a pleasure to have you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me. You have a good stream, Echo.
All right.
You might be going off now, but have a good time.
Have a good day, man.
See ya.